The restaurant was the kind of place that whispered luxury instead of shouting it. Soft golden lights reflected off polished marble floors, and the air carried the subtle scent of truffle oil and freshly baked bread. Every table was perfectly spaced, every chair upholstered in deep navy velvet. People came here not just to eat, but to be seen. On that particular evening, as the city hummed outside and the windows framed the glow of passing traffic, a group of 4 men sat near the center of the dining room, laughing loudly, their expensive watches catching the light each time they lifted their glasses. They wore tailored suits, spoke with practiced confidence, and treated the space as though it belonged to them. Amelia stood a few steps away, holding her order pad tightly, her posture straight despite the weight she carried inside. She had been a waitress at La Couronne for almost 2 years now, long enough to know the rhythms of the place and the personalities of its regular guests. She knew which customers liked their water refilled before they asked, which wanted conversation and which wanted silence. These 4 men, however, were different. From the moment they sat down, they had spoken to her without looking at her, snapping their fingers when they wanted attention, correcting her pronunciation of the wine list even when she was right. Still, Amelia smiled. She always did. Smiling paid the bills. She brought them everything they asked for. Steaks cooked exactly to temperature, a rare bottle of wine from the private cellar, sides arranged like artwork. Each time she approached, their laughter grew louder, their comments sharper. One of them joked about how people like her must love working in places like this. Another smirked and asked if she planned to do something better with her life someday. Amelia nodded politely even as her cheeks burned. She had learned long ago that dignity in her line of work was something you protected quietly. When the meal ended, the men leaned back in their chairs, satisfied and full, discussing business deals worth more than Amelia would earn in several lifetimes. She placed the bill gently on the table, as she always did, thanking them for dining at La Couronne. For a moment, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Then one of the men picked up the bill, glanced at it, and laughed. It wasn't a warm laugh. It was sharp, dismissive. "This can't be right," he said, waving the bill in the air. "This is absurd." Amelia's heart skipped. "Sir, that's the total for your meal. If there's an issue, I can have the manager." No, another man interrupted, grinning. "The issue is simple. The service wasn't worth this." They all chuckled, leaning toward each other as if sharing a private joke. Amelia felt the room tilt slightly, the noise of the restaurant fading as her focus narrowed to their faces. "We'll pay for the food," the first man said, pulling out his wallet slowly. "But the tip?" "No, absolutely not." Amelia swallowed. Tips were not a luxury for her. They were rent, groceries, the small cushion that kept her from falling behind. "Sir," she said carefully, "gratuity isn't included, but nothing," another man said. "You brought plates from the kitchen to the table. That's your job. Don't expect extra for doing what you're paid to do." Their words stung more than she expected. Around them, other diners continued their conversations, unaware or unwilling to notice. Amelia felt suddenly exposed, like she was standing alone under a harsh light. She wanted to argue, to defend herself, but experience told her it would only make things worse. As she stood there trying to maintain her composure, she didn't notice the man who had just entered the restaurant. He wore no suit, no flashy watch. His clothes were simple, almost understated, but there was a calm authority in the way he moved. He paused near the entrance, observing the room quietly, his eyes taking in every detail. This man was Daniel Moreau, the billionaire owner of La Couronne, though very few people recognized him on sight. He preferred it that way. Daniel had built his empire on principles he rarely spoke about publicly: respect, accountability, and fairness. That evening he had come in unannounced, something he did from time to time, to see how his restaurant truly functioned when no one knew he was watching. As he walked further into the dining room, he noticed Amelia standing at the table, her shoulders tense, the men speaking animatedly. Their laughter did not sound kind. He slowed his steps, standing just close enough to hear. "We're doing you a favor," one of the men said to Amelia. "You should be grateful we even came here." Daniel's expression hardened slightly. He watched as Amelia nodded, her voice barely above a whisper as she thanked them and reached for the payment they had, left an amount that covered the bill exactly, not a cent more. As she turned away, her hands trembled just enough for him to notice. Daniel felt something settle heavily in his chest. He had seen many forms of wealth, many versions of arrogance. But this casual cruelty never failed to anger him. He followed Amelia with his eyes as she walked toward the service station, took a steadying breath, and forced her face back into a neutral expression before returning to work. Around him, the restaurant continued as if nothing had happened. But Daniel had heard everything. Daniel did not confront the men immediately. Instead, he took a seat at a nearby table and ordered a simple espresso, his gaze occasionally drifting toward the group. They were still there, laughing, signaling for another round of drinks, behaving as though the moment with Amelia had already been erased from existence. To them, it was insignificant. To Daniel, it was a test of the values he claimed to stand for. A few minutes later, he signaled to the floor manager, a young man who straightened instantly at the subtle gesture. Daniel spoke quietly, his voice calm but firm. "Who served that table?" he asked, nodding toward the four men. The manager glanced over. "Amelia, sir. One of our best." Daniel nodded. "I thought so." He watched as Amelia continued working, her professionalism unbroken despite what had just happened. There was no performance in her kindness, no exaggerated cheer. It was steady, genuine. Daniel recognized it instantly. People like her were the reason his businesses thrived, not the men who thought money gave them the right to belittle others. When the four men finally stood to leave, adjusting their jackets and speaking loudly about their next destination, Daniel rose as well. He intercepted them near the exit, positioning himself politely but unmistakably in their path. "Gentlemen," he said with a small, controlled smile, "I couldn't help but overhear part of your conversation earlier." They looked him up and down, clearly unimpressed. One of them scoffed. "And you are?" "My name is Daniel," he replied. "I own this restaurant." The laughter died instantly. For a moment there was silence, thick and uncomfortable. One of the men cleared his throat. Well, we didn't realize—" "That much is obvious," Daniel said, his tone still even. "You refused to tip your waitress because you felt her service wasn't worth it. I listened as you spoke to her as though she were beneath you." Another man bristled. "We're paying customers. We're entitled to our opinion." "You are entitled to your opinion," Daniel agreed. "You are not entitled to disrespect." He gestured gently toward the dining room. "La Couronne exists because of people like Amelia. She represents this place far better than your money ever could. And I want to be very clear. Anyone who treats my staff that way is not welcome here." The men shifted uncomfortably. One of them tried to laugh it off. "Come on, it was just a joke." Daniel's eyes hardened. "Jokes are meant to be funny to everyone involved." He then turned to the manager. "Please ensure that Amelia receives a tip equivalent to 25% of that table's bill. Charge it to my account." The men protested weakly, but Daniel raised a hand. "This isn't about the money," he said. "It's about principle. And now, gentlemen, I suggest you leave." They did, their confidence deflated, their earlier arrogance replaced by embarrassment. The door closed behind them with a soft finality. Daniel found Amelia near the service station a few minutes later. She looked surprised when the manager called her over, and even more so when Daniel introduced himself. He explained what he had heard and what he had done, not with dramatic flair but with quiet sincerity. "I'm sorry you were treated that way," he said. "You didn't deserve it." Amelia felt tears sting her eyes, though she tried to keep her voice steady. "Thank you," she said. "That means more than you know." Daniel smiled gently. People often forget that how they treat others says everything about who they are. Tonight you showed grace. That matters. As the evening wound down and the restaurant slowly emptied, Amelia felt lighter than she had in months. It wasn't just the tip, generous as it was. It was the feeling of being seen, of knowing that someone with real power had chosen to use it to protect, not to dominate. Outside, the city continued its restless motion, unaware of the small but meaningful shift that had taken place inside La Couronne. For Daniel, it was a reminder of why he had built what he had built. For Amelia, it was proof that dignity could survive even the sharpest disrespect, and that sometimes the right person really was listening.